Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Before we start, if you had trouble logging into the show tonight, the problem was the email that was sent out to everybody had the wrong login link on it. That's since been corrected. And about 45 minutes before the show actually started, a few minutes ago, we sent out another urgent email to everybody with the correct login link on it. So if you will check your email within the last, say, an hour, you'll have an email from New Tracks Modeling with the correct login link for Zoom for tonight's show. We're sorry for any inconvenience this may cause anybody or problems. It's just one of those things that happen. So with that said, I want to introduce Father Ron Walters to help us with the show's prayer. Father Walters, welcome.
O God, as we create in miniature the world around us, may we marvel at the beauty and genius which created the world and instilled in us a portion of your great knowledge and wisdom. Give success to the work of our hands, O God. Amen.
Thank you so much, Father. We really appreciate all of your help and all of your contributions to our show. The sponsor for our show is Brennan's Model Railroading. I have a short video we'd like to play for you now.
For over 25 years, Brennan's Model Railroading has been offering unique products for the O-scale market. Our flagship product, Brennan's Better Ballast, was an instant hit and continues to be the industry leader. Its prototypical size and natural color blend of real crushed granite make it the choice for discerning modelers. Since then, we've developed a complementary line of natural ground cover materials. Additionally, we offer craftsman kits that anyone can build with complete photographically illustrated instructions that assume you've never done this before. The Sonky Wanky Coffee Company is the latest and the fourth kit to be added to our ongoing and highly popular limited edition Ellison Tribute series. These kits take Ellison's scratch-built iconic structures to a new level with Dennis spin. The idea being that if Frank were alive today, this is how we would build these models using modern methods and materials. Use the QR code to visit our website.
The My Build, the next one's coming up next week. And Chris is not here this evening. Chris is providing some military service and providing toys for tots. And I'm admiring for doing it. It's such a worthwhile program that the military provide for the kids. So in his place, Greg Cassidy is going to talk to us about the upcoming My Build that is for next week. Greg?
Hi, Jim. Yes, we already have 6 participants signed up. We'd love to see more because interiors, I just can't get enough of them. The My Build will be next Wednesday, December 18th, and this one is about interiors, insides of buildings or cars or cabooses, inside of an engine house, inside of anything you built, even if it's just looking in a storefront window that you put something inside. Chris would like you to get the images to him by December 15th, so he has time to put them together. His email is railrunner130@hotmail.com. And if you haven't taken part, be sure to send a photo of yourself as well. And Chris also sent me along this picture. This is the operation that he's at right now. They're flying up in the air pushing people out of perfectly good airplanes. But it's a very worthwhile cause. Apparently, paratroopers can come from all around the country, and they donate a toy, and they get to jump with a noted paratrooper from another country or from another division, and they get to wear that patch. And it's a big deal in paratroopers. And Chris will be back with us next week to present the My Build. So hopefully we have a lot of good photos to look at. I've seen 2 of the entries so far, and they're amazing. So that's it, Jim. I'll go back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to it, because I also love to see the interior work that people do. And some of it is just so amazing that it just is unbelievable, the details that some modelers go to interior designing their buildings. Last week, we had a problem getting out our newsletter. It's since been solved. So everybody should have the newsletter by now. If you haven't seen our newsletter, if you'll go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, you can download all of the issues from the website. And like I say, the December issue, I think you'll find is really got some interesting stories in it. And thanks to Martin Breckbild, MMR, our editor, the magazine is it's really becoming, it looks like.
Yeah, the railroad Zoom meeting, but I can't get it the sounds from my earbud.
So thanks to Martin, we're really improving a lot the newsletter. It's getting more of a look of a magazine, it seems to me, than a newsletter every issue. And I hope you're enjoying it. If you have any issues that you'd like to talk to Martin about, don't hesitate and let us know what you think of the newsletter that is being published. As far as our scholarship is going, we're doing very well right now with our scholarship and our fundraising part of it. We'll be holding next week a wrap up for this year about our scholarship program. So this week and next week really are the 2 weeks that we'll be talking about the scholarship for the rest of this year, because next week is the last show that we'll be doing this year on Wednesday night. So if you have not contributed yet to our scholarship program, we're a 501c3, so your donation is 100% tax deductible, and hope that you'll consider donating some funds to the scholarship, regardless of the amount. You don't have to contribute $200 or $100 or any set amount. $1 is fine. Whatever you feel that you would like to contribute to make the program successful is great, and we certainly appreciate every dollar that we can raise. As I said, that there's 2 ways that you can donate, easy ways. One of them is through Zeffy, and that takes a credit card to do that. And the other is by check, where you can send it directly to Tom Farrell, and we have his address, Phil, on a slide, as well as the QR code for Zeffy on a slide somewhere. There they are. So that's, if you want to do it through Zeffy, the QR code gets you to Zeffy. If you'd like to do it by check, then there's Tom's address in the lower part of the slide, and then he'll deposit it into the account. So hope you'll do that. Hope you'll contribute to the kids' programs this year. Well, now let's start the program. The first presenter tonight is Chris Donahue. And Chris has a cement theme layout, a small layout, that I thought was really interesting. And therefore I asked him if he would come on the show and talk to us about it. So Chris, welcome.
I don't see him. Are you
Chris,
there, Chris? There's a Chris Underwood, but I don't think that's him.
I don't see him here, Jim at the
Okay.
moment.
Let me try to come back to him later then. So next, let me go to HO scale modeling. And our sponsor for that is Mainline Hobbies. If we could run their video, please.
Oh, boy.
Mainline Hobby Supply is your one-stop store for model trains in G, O, S, HO, N and Z scales, including locomotives, rolling stock, track, train sets, and more to help build your model railroad. We are the largest model railroad shop in the area, and we carry a wide range of model railroad supplies across scales. Our friendly staff is always available to help with your modeling needs and to special order anything you may require. Mainline Hobby Supply is in southern Pennsylvania, halfway between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. We are only an hour away from Baltimore, and we are easy to get to from the 70, 81, 83, and 270 freeways. Plan to stop by on your next trip through Pennsylvania. Mainline Hobby Supply also has an online store that can cater to your modeling needs wherever you are located. With our large inventory, fixed shipping costs, friendly and knowledgeable service and prompt shipping, consider Mainline Hobby Supply for your next online order. Use the QR code to access our online store.
And our host for this segment of our show is Ed O'Rourke, MMR. Ed, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Let's see here. Let's share the screen.
There you go.
Where is it here? There we are. Oh, and let's do the slideshow. See if okay. All right. So here we go. So this is going to be a continuing sort of series here. Steve brought this up in one of his what do you want to talk about things. And I thought it was an interesting topic. Starting over. What do you do when you start over? So this was my first adult layout. When we first bought our house, I built it in the basement of a 1920s colonial. Established the basic plan that I followed in succeeding layouts, modeling the area around New Haven Station, which in the 1950s, which was where I grew up. I built it with bench work. I actually brought from my mother's house from a youthful layout. It was at that time loop to loop. I hadn't discovered staging yards yet. I had 3 kids. I had a teaching job that kept me busy, a house that needed work, not a lot of money, and so progress was slow, and there was definitely a lot to learn. I did get my Golden Spike, Scenery, Electrical, and Chief Dispatcher AP awards with it, but as you can see, those are Atlas selectors down there. This was cab control when I first built it with a couple of model rectifier power packs. I converted it to DCC at some point, but never took the thing out of there. And as you can see, I did my first installation of catenary there. The then president of our division came over to see the layout and said, Ed, how can you model the New Haven and not have catenary? And since I didn't have an answer to that, I found a guy down in Virginia that sells accurate New Haven catenary. So this was my first iteration of that. And this, at this point, it was now 2010. I'd been at this for 30 years, and the shortcomings of the layout were pretty much obvious. My youngest daughter finished school and moved to New Orleans for a job, so we were empty nesters. And I was ready to tear it down and start over. But The nest was only empty about 6 months when family circumstances necessitated bringing Judy's mother to live with us. The 2-story colonial with bedrooms and bathrooms upstairs, up 17 stairs, was not going to work. So we found a patio home in a condo development. Space was smaller than the basement of the old house and had the complication of a water heater, which you see over here, and a furnace, which is hiding behind there, and an electrical panel, all of which had to be accessible. So it was what I had to work with. As you can see, the stuff is moved in here. It took me a year to figure out what I was going to be able to do, but eventually I came up with a plan that I thought would work, preserving the same basic operating scheme of bringing trains in under diesels from Boston, taking off the diesel or the steam engine, putting on the electric, and taking it to New York. At that point, 14 years ago, I did all the construction myself. Nowadays, I do all that work with a credit card. It's much, much easier and less strain on the back and that sort of thing. I did the lights, the walls, everything. And I was able to dismantle the old layout in such a way that I could reuse most of the underlying bench work, which saved me quite a bit of lumber costs. There were challenges. These spaces are under the stairs. I don't recommend this if you aren't 20 years old and able to climb in under there and re-rail trains when they derail. There was a pretty steep upgrade out of that staging up to the main level, which was sort of legendary in the Central New York division. So it was, it was what I could do in the space that I had. And 12 years later, it looked pretty much like this. I had had it fully scenic. It was operational. But there's always a but. It was time to move again. After my mother-in-law passed, we realized that this house was too big for the two of us. It had 5 bedrooms, 4 full baths, which was fine when the girls used to come visit, but now we go visit them. Had a significant number of stairs to navigate, and we spent over a year looking for a new place that met our requirements, a sewing room for my wife, a train room for me, no stairs into the house, accessible laundry, and a guest room. And once we found that place, I had a couple of friends come in for a last run, as you can see here. And then I dismantled the layout once again. I had built it so that it could be unscrewed and taken apart, and most of it reused. I saved most of the buildings, the rolling stock, and etc. And this is what it, how the progress of doing that got to be. And here we are. There's the space. The Lark Products backdrop was peeled off the wall and saved. The movers had quite a bit to say about moving all that lumber. Are we moving all that stuff? Yep. Oh God. Okay. So they carried it up out of the basement, which was a good thing. And so there we were, and we have a new space. And this is where I'm going to stop for today. And next month we'll visit, what I did with this space. But this is now the 3rd layout at age 74. So can be done. It can be done. But as I say, nowadays I do the work with a credit card. So there you are. We'll come back to it and do some more next week. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Ed? Ed, we'll look forward to seeing you later on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, now I want to turn to N-scale modeling. And our sponsor for N-scale modeling is National Capital Trains.
National Capital Trains is the largest supplier of N-scale modeling products in the state of Virginia. We have been in business since 1989. We carry a full line of modeling products, specializing in N and HO-N3 scales. We carry a large selection of competitively priced high-quality N-scale products from Atlas, Bachmann, Digitrax, Intermountain, Cato, Microtrains, NCE, Pico, Rapido, Soundtrax, as well as Brass. For foreign railroad train aficionados, we offer a wide selection of Japanese and European prototype trains. We are located 20 miles from Washington, D.C. in Springfield, Virginia. We are a short 7-minute drive off Interstate 95. Stop in and see us for the best in N scale. We also have online ordering on our website, including great prices and expert advice. Call us for your N scale modeling needs and advice. Use the QR code to visit our website. We look forward to serving you.
And our host for this segment of our show is Bill Stimson. Bill, welcome.
Hi, how you doing, Jim?
I'm doing well. You?
Doing just fine. Okay, where'd it go? Here we go. So this month I want to talk about building N-scale plaster kits, which I have done in the past. I built three downtown deco kits over the years and had an opportunity to get a couple more kits a few weeks ago and decided to take it and show you my versions of their various kits. I also had hoped to do some scratch build plaster building on this month, but I didn't get around to that. My grandchildren brought us a flu bug for Thanksgiving, so I missed about a week's worth of modeling dealing with that. So I bought these two kits from Downtown Deco right before Thanksgiving, and I thought, no, I really don't need a strip club on my layout, but the building looks interesting, so we'll see what we can do with it. So the first steps in doing a plaster kit is I don't know if you can see kind of around the edges of some of these pieces, there's some flashing. You got to file some of that off. You got to make sure some of these window openings are perfectly square. And then I laid it out on my bench in the garage and sprayed it with in this case, an Army Painter light gray primer, so that help seal the plaster so the acrylic paints I use later won't just sink in and soak up the paint. So I decided after painting that this looked more like a bank than a strip club. So I went online, I found some signs and had some fun ended up printing them on Scotch Magic tape. The attempt over just some clear styrene didn't work at all with the inkjet, but printing on the Scotch Magic tape worked out pretty well. So I first put some curtains in the window, and then I peeled that piece of the tape off the styrene and placed it over the curtains, and then placed another piece of clear styrene on top of that to make the signs. This particular kit came with this what I thought was a spectacular decal, so I decided to include that anyway. And one of the things I've learned over the years is you paint the area you want to put the decal in with some gloss varnish. It helps the decal adhere a little better. And then you soak them in paint and line them up. It didn't line up first, but with a little coaxing from a toothpick, I got it to the spot I wanted it. Then I decided this side needed a stairway. So I had a Bar Mills covered stairway kit and put some of that together to provide a stairway on this. And when I was looking for signs for banks, I ran across this picture on Shorpy as I went down the rabbit holes. And I'm not a nut lover, so my family will enjoy the irony of a Bill's Fresh Roasted Peanuts factory on my layout. And you can see the size of this thing when I get it built. I didn't take any other pictures of the construction of it other than this is a piece of Kleenex tissue that I've attached a wire to make an awning. And you can see now here in the awning hanging down, and there's the peanuts next to the Dime Savings Bank, which I thought was a great name for a bank. Here, after I got the building, after you assemble these plaster buildings, a lot of cases there's a gap between sides. And so I attempted to fill it with some plaster. I didn't do a great job. And, Randy, who owns the Downtown Deco, does not recommend this. He, in fact, says mostly you're better off just trying to hide it with with some foliage or a drown pipe or something like that. Well, I went back and I added some spackle, and that seemed to fill pretty well. And then with a little bit of filing and coaxing and some paint, it turns into a pretty decent bank. Oops. The next kit was the part of the Blair Avenue, #2. And one of the reasons I like that one is you'll notice the picture on the upper left here. That's from George Celios's Franklin and South Manchester. Either Randy copied the building or George built one of Randy's kits. I don't know which, but that always seemed like a neat building, and I decided to go ahead and build it myself. When I do a lot of these, I paint the window openings with flat black just to make it easier to disguise what might be behind it. And then I added some curtains on the backs of the windows. And once again, I filled the voids with spackle and kind of filed and painted it. The other building in this kit is a barbecue shack, which didn't come with the rafter tails. And I thought, that's odd. So I put some rafter tails on it. And that made it look a little better, a little more realistic anyway. So here are the kits as I finished them up. And they turned out, I think, pretty well. I especially like the idea. Randy suggested in his instructions that you cut this sign to cut off like the rest of the sign fell off with the stucco. That was a neat idea to do that. And there's some roof details. I especially like the chimney on the barbecue shack. So try a plaster kit. I know that Randy makes them in O scale, HO, and N scale. I found them easy to build. They've got lots of detail, and there's a variety of styles to build from. Anybody got any questions?
What was the
Bill, what are
trick
you using to glue together the plaster parts?
I just used Aleene's tacky glue.
Yeah, I find that or carpenter's glue does just fine.
Yeah, either one works fine. I know Randy recommends doing 5-minute epoxy, but I don't want to mess with the epoxy, so I just use white glue or like you say, a yellow carpenter's glue. I've used that too for plaster.
What's the trick to printing on the magic tape?
I don't know that there is one. This particular magic tape, I taped down a piece of styrene to a piece of printer paper, some really thin, the stuff they give you for windows and kits. Put a big sheet of that down, and I rolled the tape over the top of it, and then just printed it out. It takes several tries. You got to print what you want to print, and then align the tape with where you're going to print. But in my case, not touching it, and don't put any water anywhere near it until you get the second piece of styrene over the top of it. I did do it twice. The first time I accidentally got some water-based glue on it, and the ink just disappeared completely. It was a big smear. So I do have a fixative that I bought and I haven't tried yet because I bought some decal paper. One of these days I'll try that and see how that works. But I didn't have any problem printing on the tape.
Yeah, I was going to mention the decal paper as well. You can go to Hobby Lobby and get
Yeah.
a small packet of their decal paper. And if you follow because a lot of people get very upset and claim it doesn't work. But if you read the instructions and do it in accordance with the instructions, and you have to go into your printer and change the settings of the printer to treat it like photo paper, and then it prints really nicely. And again, you seal it with dull coat or something. But that's how I did several of the signs on the structures I did recently and was very pleasantly surprised with the results of the decal paper.
So say again how you got the tape to go through the printer.
So I taped down a piece of the window material that the kits come with, put the tape over, and then put some tape on top of that, and then you run it through your printer. Then you could peel the if you were to put the tape directly onto the paper, you'd never get it peeled back off, which is why I put it on that I don't know if it's styrene or clear plastic, whatever it is.
Called acetate.
Yeah, or acetate. It'll the tape will peel off of that better than it will off of paper. But as long as you tape down the lead edge, it'll go through the printer without any problems. And you just run it through the first time, figure out where the section you want to print is going to line up on the paper and put the tape over that. It's a trial and error thing, I realize, but I got plenty of paper.
Yeah.
I'm running out of printer ink, but
Anybody have any more questions for Bill?
Bill, this is Greg. Also, you were talking about spackling the joints and stuff. When I did a couple of Randy's kits, one thing that I tried, I had some powdered hydrocal. And so in the joints where I'd drip a little bit of the powdered hydrocal in and then use a wet brush to kind of moisten it, and it'll settle into the crack without really spreading or anything.
yeah, that sounds interesting. I should try that one time.
Yeah, it's easy to do and it's hard to mess up.
Yeah.
Anything else for Bill? Bill, thanks so very much. Hope you have a great holiday.
You too, Jim.
But now I want to turn to Tom Farrell. Tom is building, and this is his final segment building it, the Tom York design kit that's produced by Frenchman River Model Works of Becky Sue's House of Beauty. Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me on the show. And this is, just give me a moment here. So this is, oops, all right. Guys see that?
Yes.
Oh, hold on for some reason. Okay, great. So I'm doing Frenchman River Model Works, Becky Sue's House of Beauty. This is part 2 of 2. And Frenchman River Model Works is offering the New Tracks folks a 20% discount on this kit. You just go to their website and select the kit and enter in NEWTRX and you'll get 20% off. It's as you'll see, it turns out to be a very nice kit. It's a original Thomas York. And anyone that's familiar with Thomas York knows that he's an artist and one of the most famous kit makers in our hobby. And here's an opportunity to get a resin kit at a significant discount. And it's an original. It's a first run. So this is the Watch Me Build then of Becky Sue's House of Beauty. It's a new release. just came out. That's my finished kit. I'll show you how I got it from where we were last week to where we are, or to a finished kit. So this is where we left off. Basically, I had the 4 walls up, and I began detailing the front of the kit with these printouts. The next thing I did is I painted all the interior walls with a flat acrylic paint from a craft paint. You know, it's roughly $1 a bottle. It is the flattest flat that I've ever come across and sticks just fine to the resin. I created a heavy framework. They do give you wood for this, and they basically outline the perimeter 180 degrees. I do things a little overkill, perhaps, but I built a stout framework here. And they give you this cardboard here to the right, which would probably work just fine, particularly on this framework that I made. But I cut the cardboard to fit the roof section, and then I used it as a template to cut some styrene, approximately 020 styrene I used, and in place of the cardboard. And then I super glued that down to that framework that I put in. I'm always concerned that the, probably for no reason, that the cardboard will take on moisture and eventually warp. So, you know, while I'm at it, I just build up a heavy frame and I use styrene. Next up, I paint that styrene with that same acrylic flat paint. Even though we're going to provide or put a tissue over that provided by Frenchman River, but I paint it flat black because I don't want that, I don't want to see white below my simulated tar paper. So then I just take Elmer's glue and I just, right out of the bottle, I just basically squeeze it onto the roof. Then I take an inexpensive paintbrush, or a paintbrush I'm not real concerned with keeping, and I thoroughly spread this glue so it's on there fairly uniformly. And then they provided this tissue, it's black in color, and I just put that on the Elmer's glue, and it does a very effective job of simulating tar paper. It's a nice look. Next up, I went a little off the reservation with this, and I decided to put a fence around my building. I pre-stained scale 1x6 material for the actual fencing. Then I chopped them to approximately 8 feet in scale height. Then I took scale 4x4s, and with these are hunter line stains that I have in favor now that I use. I stained it a blue-gray. These are the 4x4s. They're approximately 8 feet 6 inches in length. And then the runners, and I'll show you how I put the fence together. They're 2x6s. So basically using 1x6s, 4x4s, and 2x6s. And this particular fence is 36 feet long. Now you're not going to see these runners, so I didn't see any point in making them like 8 feet long on this particular model. So the first thing I do is tape down 2 of the runners, hitting the high and low point. They're approximately 1 inch, they're 1 inch apart, which is 4 feet. And then I super glue the 4x4s to them. I just 1 inch apart, which is 4 feet on those as well. And then I go back and I put that third runner down the middle. So this goes, it's very fast construction. I typically super glue the ends, and then everything in the middle I use yellow glue. At least that's what I did this time around. And then this is the actual fence work. And just with a paintbrush, I take a lid, a vinyl lid from a jar or just a piece of paper, and I put out some yellow glue and a paintbrush, and I simply, at 1 inch at a time, I paint the glue on these runners, and then I just, with O scale, it's big enough and my fingers are nimble enough that I just stick them on one at a time. You can use tweezers. I put a little space between them. Once they're all on and dry, you can make this fence rustic and go back with an X-Acto knife and cut into the fence and put in knot holes or split some of these boards or whatnot. It depends how far you want to go with it. This time I behaved myself and basically had it in relatively good condition here. So there's that 36 foot in length, 8 feet high, 1x6 fence in place. These are approximately 4 feet apart. I simply hold the fence up, put super glue on each one of these bottoms of these 4x4s and place it in place. And then I will, as I'll show you, I'll put fencing on 3 sides here. Next up, I wanted basically the yard to be unkept. So I took Mark Wahlberg material and just cut this little square out, and I actually super glued it in place. That's right out of the package. No artistry on my part. Next up, a technique for putting signs on the building and on the fence. I just go to YouTube and I model in the, well, specifically 1930. So I do searches for 1920 to 1930 advertisements and billboards. Then I bring them into PowerPoint, and then I take those images and I copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, and make them 3 or 4 different sizes. And on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I put, maybe a half a dozen or more different signs on my PowerPoint. Then I print them out, cut them out, and you don't just glue the signs onto your structure or on the fence without, or what I do is I take a very fine sandpaper and I sand the back of them, and I make this very thin, this paper. So if you're looking at this, I flip it over after it's cut out. I typically chase the perimeter with a black permanent marker. And then I take a very fine, like a 300 or 400 sandpaper, and I carefully sand the back to make it as thin as possible. I sand it till I basically can see the ink. So there's very little paper here, particularly on the edges. And that gives you a very nice look, almost like a decal. So you can see the black outline, at least on some of these, that I bothered to do that. This is a nice technique. I've also toyed with, I have used decals and put them on. You almost get the same result with feathering the paper. I glue them on with Elmer's glue. I paint the back of these. I paint the back here with, I squeeze Elmer's glue onto there, and then I paint it with a paintbrush, thoroughly cover it with Elmer's glue, white glue, and then I place it on the building or the fence. The same technique on this side of the building. There's additional fence. I should point out that the kit comes with decals. I chose to just put some of my own. but it had some very nice decals on there. One thing that I did do on the sidewalk is I went back with, again, my friend Elmer's glue, and I painted a little Elmer's glue here on these, on the seams, the edges, the joints of the concrete. And then I went back and I sprinkled ground cover on the joints to basically show that this is, well, that's more realistic rather than just having straight up concrete. I didn't do it on the front of the building, assuming that's where people are walking and they just might take care of that. But on the side of the building, I thought, you know, let's put a little weeds growing here against the side of the building and on these joints. You can see here I added some roof detail. This air conditioning unit came with the kit. I primered it with Tamiya light gray primer, a non-filling primer. Then I painted it black, flat black with a Tamiya flat black acrylic enamel. And then with Floqual old silver, I painted these screens. And then I went back with some washes and some pan pastels and rusted the framework here. This is nothing more than a brass or plastic tube that I drilled a hole in here, glued this tube in place, painted it black, and called that done. This is where it's going to fit on my layout. This is a Frenchman River kit that I did several months ago, the Mickey Spillane building. This is the unfinished portion of my layout. It's on the opposite side of what you've all seen to date. This is a scratch build hotel that I did about 10 years ago, the Broadway Hotel. And this is a resin kit from Frenchman River Model Works, excellent kit. And this is a companion kit from Frenchman River Model Works. So I'm going to have some kind of street here, and in front of it I'll have a depot. And this is a couple years out, but this is how it's shaping up anyway. That's the location. Of course, this will all be finished, but that's the look. Yeah. So here is the finished model. I've put the rear fence in place. I wanted to do all this work here before I put in the rear fence because it sort of blocks your way. Put some additional signs here. I weathered everything with pan pastels, and it's a very attractive little model, little kit. Everything's weathered. I build everything on plywood. I put a little side air conditioner on here. This came with the kit. There's a nice look of the signs. I should mention that after I glue them onto the either the brick here or onto the fence, once that glue dries, I go back with Dull Coat, which is available in bottle form, and I dull coat all my signs so they're basically sealed. Then I go back with pan pastels or chalk and I weather them, sort of knock the sheen off of everything between the flat dull coat and the weathered weathering chalks. It's a pretty striking look, really, you know. These are just, they cost nothing. They're right off my printer. There's the other side. Sometimes I place them haphazardly on here, like very nice kit. So thank you for watching, and I urge you to take advantage of the and support Frenchman River Model Works. If you like to see my work and see their kits, And like I said last week, if you're an armchair model railroader and you haven't built something in a while, and even if you're not an O scaler, try this resin kit out. Remember, resin kits are relatively easy to put together. It's all in the finishing, and they can be quite entertaining. So thank you for your time. Yep. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Tom? Gotta ask you, Tom, what'd you put in the backyard?
I put an old tire and an old bicycle. And I was debating on putting a rusty old swing set. I think that's going to be the finishing touch.
Tom, Tom, what color did you paint the facade on the front?
I sprayed the facade with chalk white, and then I used a pan pastel, like a burnt umber or one of the browns, and I dulled it down.
Okay.
But a Krylon chalk white, and then just a flat to my acrylic enamel for the black.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom. You have a great holiday.
Talk to you guys later. Yep.
Well, now I want to turn to Martin Brickbuild, MMR, for his Scratch Building Corner. Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
My God, you're all spiffy for the holidays. Hair's combed and everything. My gosh.
It won't last.
I didn't recognize you.
No one does. Yes. Shall we roll on? Indeed. Most appropriate. Part 2 of our exact passenger car story. This is where we stopped last week. I had stained the interior walls, touched up the yellow paint around the windows, and alluded to the fact that we will maybe even complete this car this week. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember making my slides, that we will. But first, I'm going to add a carpet down the middle of the aisle. This is just dollhouse wallpaper. And I wish I could tell you when and where I got this. It was so long ago that the shop is long, long gone. But there's all kinds of dollhouse stuff that's available that can be used. And a sheet of this has been lasting me for about 20 years now. So, you know, a slice out of a sheet goes a long ways. So you can do a lot of cars. So unfortunately, that means a lot of my cars have the same carpeting on the inside, regardless of the lettering on the outside of the car. They all went to the same outlet store and bought their carpet. Nobody does that anymore, do they? Okay, so we put the one side wall back on. I said last week, though, those holes in the side where the nails were are very important because that lets me put the right side on the right side of the car base. It also puts it in perfect alignment back to where it belongs. And it gives it something to hold it in place while the glue, which in this case was goo and CA, and the nails, all secure that side. Once the side's on, tight, good and tight, I had saved the stove casting when I did the salvage work originally. Those are actually adequate. There's a little shielding piece behind it that goes up. It's the one single window in the side. So there's another stove on the mirror image, so not mirror image, rotational symmetry, sorry, on the other side. So it'll be two stoves. So it'll be a nice toasty car for passengers. The seats are in place on this side. And I did this because I've learned over the years, putting seating in with both sides in place at the same time is hard when you have big fat fingers, even with tweezers and hemostats and what have you. So this, take advantage of one side being open. I can slide things in, see where it's all going to go up against the windows, etc., and place them without running into too many difficulties. Okay, so the other side. You're going to put the other wall in. You got to put the other side on because you have to put the seats up against it. So eventually you end up struggling putting things in place with multiple tweezers, hemostats, etc., with glue on the bottom, and praying you don't make too much of a mess when you do it. Same thing again, the nail holes helped keep it all in alignment. The tricky part was putting the end on because I didn't know which end belonged to which end. And I apparently got lucky and grabbed or it doesn't matter. And either way, they go in between in between the sides. And I didn't put wood, you can't really tell, I didn't put wood at the bottom of this. I just painted it brown. Since I can't see it, I figured you can't see it either. Close enough, good enough, leave it alone. And going back and putting in wood on the ends is a little more tricky than you really wanted to be confronted with. Working around the door, working around the joint in the corner, I just said, painting it brown's a lot easier. We'll stop there and be happy. And just another view of the same thing. The end's on there. And you can see it sits a little low. Well, the roof takes care of that. The roof actually fits down over this. And there is the roof. Fancy that. Okay, so they put the other end on and inserted it in between the two sides, snaps down between the two and into the end platform. So it's not as simple as it seems. It's got to fit in between two sides and into a slot in the floor on the end platform. But once in place, it's actually rather sturdy, rather tight. This is a rather well-designed kit, despite being at least 10 years older than me. So once it's in place, not a problem. The roof, I covered it with canvas, which is basically single-ply napkins. I did that because there was too much wood grain showing on this. I just didn't like the way it looked. Okay, so I updated one thing on the exterior. So it's covered with the napkin, single-ply overlapping napkins all over the place, all the way down and around the corners, and on the ends, on the duckbill. It's painted dark, lark dark gray, and the smoke jacks were added after I drilled out the holes, which was interesting because the metal bases for the original jacks were still there. So the drill really just pushed them out. Everything fit, it just snapped into place. And there's nothing holding that roof except friction and gravity. And I said to myself, don't mess with it. It's in place. And if you really have to get it apart someday to do something on the inside, now you can, but don't mess with it any more than you already have. Fits nice and snug. And there's the side view of it. I did nothing to the exterior parts, sides or the sides or the ends, other than a sponge and some warm water. Just scrubbed it clean. I left that hand lettering right where it is. It's kind of odd because there's other lettering actually underneath of the hand lettering that is in the embossed sides. We'll get to that with the other car, but I didn't see any purpose to messing with all this hand lettering, particularly around the windows. I thought it looked pretty sharp, and I didn't want to. I figured whatever I did to it would probably make it much worse. So stop before I ruin it. And that may be a good lesson on a lot of preservation or restoration work. I mean, if there's a line between restoration and preservation and making a disaster out of something that was worth saving. So put the trucks back on. I did not save the Lincoln pin coupler that was at the one end. I got some more Lincoln pin couplers from Bernie Kopinski, and those are beautiful for use, but I thought I'd actually put those in. I would have had to modify the openings at the ends on the underbody under the platforms, and I thought I really didn't want to do that. So I found that I actually had some old black plastic All Nation dummy couplers, which with just a little bit of sanding slid right through the opening and a single screw where the link and pin coupler was, secured them perfectly fine where they were. And they're in a coupler pocket now, so they don't swivel all over the place. I think they look okay. They're certainly adequate. And that's just another view of the same car, the other side of the car. Okay, so next year, this is the other car. This is the other Exacta car. It's actually an earlier car. This one's stamped, pressed, embossed copper alloy. It's considerably heavier. It looks like it's a pretty solid car. It's filthy. And it's got some funky lettering on it. And you can see it's got a lot of filth on it. And if it looks like it's pretty solid until you flip it over and you can hear the entire interior rattling around in it. So that's where we start next year, is figuring out how to take this apart without ruining it. So I'll stop there, and we'll be back next year with the second Exacta car.
Well, that first one's a good-looking car, Martin.
Not bad for a 70, 80-year-old car.
Not bad at all.
I mean, we should look so good.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody got any questions for Martin?
I do, Martin.
Yeah,
Pat. The ends of that passenger car, the one you just did, there's there dummy lights or something on that thing on the end? Like
there are on the red one.
Okay.
There weren't on the yellow one, but the brackets were there.
Oh, okay. That's what I wondered what that was.
They're the brackets for marker lights, whatever you want.
Or is it something to light the stair or the steps going up, maybe, or something?
Right. But the red one has them on the one end.
Okay.
And they are they're actually pretty significant pieces of brass.
Mm-hmm.
And
We'll
cast bronze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. Good job.
Sure.
Well, Martin, have a happy Christmas.
You and everybody else the same.
Thank you so much. Well, now I want to turn to Matt Woods and have Matt talk to us again about one of his dioramas. Matt, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Matt Woods here. Hope you're having a good holiday season so far. This is my fourth presentation, and unfortunately my last one, unless I'm invited back. So last week we discussed some scenery techniques and using some commercially available products. So this week I want to address some low cost or inexpensive scenery techniques using more readily available materials that you can get in craft stores and home improvement stores and so forth. So that's what we're going to address this week. Bear with me one moment, just trying to find my PowerPoint.
Do you see it?
Can everyone see? Yeah, here we are.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so as I said, I'm presenting some information on low-cost modeling materials, and on this opening page, I made a little vignette as kind of a sample or test piece or study, and it's just kind of a rural scene, a Civil War era country cemetery and a sheep pasture. So I'm going to show you a few slides that kind of depict some of these low-cost materials, and I'll give a little commentary on each of them. This is a kind of a country road scene, and most of the grass that you see was done with jute. So it's jute twine or rope that has been unraveled and cut into tufts and secured with glue. And this is an example of, simulating the commercially available tufts that we discussed last week with a much more inexpensive material. Certainly, it's more labor intensive, and it takes some practice to achieve the tufts. You're basically cutting off a small amount of unwind jute twine and holding it in one hand and kind of making a little tuft and then gluing it in place. But this is just one example. Here is an example utilizing primarily China bristle brushes as a fiber material. So most of the foreground grass in front of the locomotive was done with China bristle brushes and some craft brooms. You go to these various craft stores and you see these cinnamon brooms that smell very good. And they're made out of a very fine kind of woody type material. And they make an excellent, just small trees and underbrush. Here's another scene that was done primarily with jute, some of the craft brooms, and evergreens made out of artificial steel wool. And I'll get into some techniques on how I went about that. But this is kind of a riverbank scene. And almost everything in that scene is either natural material, such as the logs and the deadfall, or stuff that was obtained from a craft store. Here's another shot of that. Here again, using the China bristle brushes. China bristle brush, for those who are not familiar with it, and I'm going to have another photo of these materials in their raw form, but they're just a very inexpensive brush that's actually made out of pig hair. And they come in different widths, and you can cut off the fibers, and they have an excellent natural color to them. So they're basically ready to go. And I'm also using some baby's breath here that had been dyed. Most of this is secured with hot glue. And unfortunately, you can kind of see some of the hot glue holding the tufts in place. And, you need to be careful with how you actually secure them, but we'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, so what kind of prompted this presentation was that I had put some scenery photos of mine on one of the Owen 30 Facebook pages, and somebody made the commentary that scenery materials were expensive, particularly if you're doing an entire layout. And I think, there's some truth to that, in that, with some of the new materials that are out, particularly some of the grass mats and, some of these different tufts and so forth, you can get into a fair amount of money. So, the use of these more natural type fibers and just, anything that resembles a grass, whether it be a paintbrush, whether it be unwind jute or twine, polyfiber, these types of things, can all be used for scenery. And, as the hobby shops have started to disappear and, it's just more difficult to get some of these materials. Like, I love the Martin Wellberg scenery products. And, I've used his stuff extensively, but unfortunately, there's such a high demand for his stuff through Scenic Express that many times it's out of stock. So, if you're going along and you're trying to build scenery and you can't get a certain material that you've been using, that kind of leaves you in a bind. So, being able to use these other materials and have pretty much an endless supply of them that you can secure, from Walmart or Lowe's or wherever, is much more convenient. Also, I believe that, kind of doing this old school method enhances the creativity and the artistry and gives you maybe more modeling satisfaction than simply a peel and stick type approach where you're just pulling tufts off a package and gluing them down. So, there's some skill and there's some technique involved in using these materials, and we'll touch a little bit on that. Here's a prototype scene that has kind of inspired some of my recent work. And, this is an Amish farm in an area that it's kind of a reclaimed strip mill or strip mine area. And, this was taken this fall recently, and you can see the different color tones. There a lot of the grass, even in the pasture, has started to dry out. So there's a variation of the green where the animals have been consistently grazing, and then you have these drier tones along the fence line. So to me, above all else, when it comes to scenery, color is everything. Color trumps detail for certain. If the colors are correct, if you have a muted, realistic, natural tones, then detail is kind of secondary. And your eye and your mind will tell you that something looks right if the coloration is right. Another thing I would emphasize, and I kind of hinted on this, is, these raw materials, they don't come in, a prepackaged, ready to use form. So, it takes some work to be able to convert them into usable modeling products or material. Here's a sample of a little cemetery I made. Those tombstones, they're all made out of mat board or chipboard. I basically just cut strips of chipboard and then cut them into little pieces and rounded off the edges a little bit and made a little tombstone, and then painted them with some various gray tones and put some white on them to resemble kind of a whitewashed finish that had faded. All the underbrush, that's all artificial steel wool. And when I'm going to show you what that looks like in its raw form, but it's not, there's no metal to it. It's a plastic fiber that comes in a pad that can be torn apart, and it has these nice kind of stringy fibers to it. And when you put hairspray and ground foam on it, it makes an excellent underbrush. So in this photo, I've used a lot of jute to represent the dead grass, and I've made tufts and so forth out of the jute. So here's a quick list, and this is not meant to be exhaustive in any sense. Depending on what you're building, there's a whole array of materials that you can use, for structures that would be inexpensive and easily accessible. But from a scenery standpoint, I have highlighted a few different materials that I like to use. We have the jute, which comes in a kind of a ball of twine or rope. The 3M artificial steel wool, which is a gray pad. The China bristle brushes or hog hair brushes, which are normally about $1, $2 a piece. These miniature craft brooms. I used to be able to find them very readily at Pat Catan's and Michael's and different craft stores. They're just like a miniature broom that was made out of some unique fiber that I don't know where they got the material. And you used to be able to find them, all the time. For some reason, they've stopped importing them. And fortunately, I went to a secondhand store and bought a bunch of them a few months ago. So I have a pretty extensive supply now, but it has a little leaves on it, and it's a kind of an interesting material. Another thing is polyfiber. I was fortunate that I was able to find some brown polyfiber that AccuRail had made sometime in the past. So I have kind of a lifetime supply of that. And then dried and crumbled leaves. And that's just, taking leaves and crumbling them up and drying them out and make sure you kill all the bugs and so forth in the oven. So here is a photo of some of these raw materials. We got our jute, we got our China bristle brushes, we got some brown polyfiber. We have one of the 3M artificial steel wool pads, and then these craft brooms. And as you can see with that, it's kind of a useful looking fiber, and you can cut off pieces and insert them into holes and glue them into a bunch. And it makes a very interesting fiber that kind of resembles poverty grass. If you've seen that, that grows readily in the Midwest at least, and has kind of a reddish tone to it. So, and it could even be used as corn, dried out corn stalks in smaller scales. So here's another photo of that country road scene, and you can see that I've used the jute extensively. There's some, it's called different names, the leafy material. It was very common, I think back in the 80s, 90s, a lot of narrow gauge modelers used that particular material. Pepper grass, I think is what it's called. That's a lot of what the leafy trees are made of. This was a little study that I did, or a sample. Supposed to be an abandoned logging line where they'd ripped up the rails. And here I'm just using a variety of these inexpensive materials, from the jute to baby's breaths, a little bit of the artificial steel wool, a stump made out of a dowel, and some air dry clay. So there's just a lot of things you can do scenically if you have a little creativity and experiment. Okay, so kind of procedurally, or more of a step-by-step view, here's that scene of the cemetery and the sheep pasture. So we start off with a scenic base using ground foam on a painted foam base, and put in our fence posts with, those are just wooden dowels, thin wooden dowels that have been scribed with a razor saw. And I've glued the tombstones in place. The bottom left, I've put some matte medium down on the ground foam and sprinkled on some chopped jute. And in this case, your eye tells you it looks, when it's dry, it looks like dried grass, where the grass has gotten matted down and has gone kind of to seed and dried out. It doesn't have to be standing up that much to be convincing. And also, I've hot glued in some of the artificial steel wool, creating kind of our fence row with a lot of underbrush. In the upper right, I've put some more of the chopped jute onto the sheep pasture. And if you go around in the countryside, particularly in the east, you'll see these pastures, start taking on more of a dried out tone to them. Even the ones that consistently have animals grazing. And, this kind of harkens back a little bit to our presentation last week where I did the fence rows. I guess I'm somewhat obsessed with fence rows and rural scenes and so forth, but you can very effectively simulate that type of a scene with these materials. And then I've sprinkled on ground foam onto the artificial steel wool using hairspray to secure it. So here's more of a close-up, detailed look of those materials. So you see there's a lot of just fibers and you can create the detail by cutting the material into the proper lengths. It takes a little practice and dexterity, and tweezers are pretty essential for being able to grasp the tufts and just glue them in place with, I use a lot of Eileen's tacky glue, but I'll also use some Loctite CA to secure some of this stuff. And once again, coloration is everything. I like fall and the muted tones. The natural materials lend themselves to fall in particular. Here we have a lot of usage of the China bristle brush and just a variety of materials, the baby's breath, some craft broom, an evergreen made of artificial steel wool. And here's another look at another sheep pasture study, so to speak. This is a barbed wire fence made out of dowels and brown thread. And it's a little tedious trying to glue the thread, getting it to stay taut onto the fence post, but it's worth the effort. The final product looks pretty good, and it's better than spending $16 on a 30 inches of Woodland Scenics barbed wire. Here's just another prototype scene, just showing that differentiation between the different color tones. The fence row seems to have more of a dried out coloration to it. And I think I presented this picture in one of the previous presentations, and that building would make a great dilapidated scratch build. Okay, I'm going to hit a little bit on my artificial steel wool evergreens. This is any Maine 2-footers out there. This is the Sanders water tower minus the spout. This was a winter scene that I did, but those trees in the background, I'm going to kind of show you how I did those. Here's some more of my artificial steel wool evergreens. Here's a whole forest of them getting ready to be used. Actually, sold some of these. About the time the pandemic hit, I was in, trying to produce these, furiously trying to produce them. There were some train shows coming up, and unfortunately those got canceled due to the early pandemic, but this was how I was going to market them and sell them. Okay, so what that involves is you get these inexpensive wooden dowels from Walmart. They come in a pack of about 100, and they're probably about an 1/8 inch in wide, and they're probably about 6 to 8 inches long. And you can scribe them with a razor saw to give some texture. And small pines are thinner. The trunks are thinner than you might think. They're more spindly, and the trunks are a little bit thinner than you think. So having the thin dowel is useful for a tree that would not be a large pine tree. And what I've done is I take pieces of the artificial steel wool, and you're basically using smaller and smaller disc as you go up the trunk, but you hot glue each level onto the trunk. And when you get to the top, you just kind of cap off the top of the dowel. And then spray it with hairspray and sprinkle on a green ground foam of your choice. What I like to do is put on a layer of Woodland Scenics blended turf first, and then a sparser coating of a muted green ground foam. But this is comparable to the kind of the furnace filter technique that many people are probably familiar with. But I find that the artificial steel wool has an even better texture. It's a little coarser, and it's a little bit messy to work with, because when you tear the pads apart, there's a grit that is contained within the pad, and it's a black grit, and that has a tendency to get all over things. But it is a very useful scenic material. And here's just kind of a final shot of a riverbank scene utilizing a lot of those artificial steel wool evergreens. So does anybody have any questions?
Well, Matt, I'll tell you, I for one am so impressed with the skill that you have and the artistic flair that you use in creating your dioramas. I hope that you will come back next year and give us some more examples of your work, because I think it's just beautiful. And I think we can all learn an awful lot and frankly, save a lot of money.
Well, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure presenting these ideas. And I'd be happy to come back if you'll have me.
But no question about that. You're very talented, and can't thank you enough for everything that you're doing. Anybody have any questions for Matt before he leaves?
I do. Larry McDonald here. When you use the jute and you untwine it, do you soak it and then hang it with some weights on so it straightens it out a bit rather than?
No. Most of the useful lengths that you're going to use for tufts and kind of simulating grass are going to be pretty short. It does have a tendency to curl a little bit. But by and large, if you keep the lengths, probably a 1/4 inch or less, it's fairly straight. It will stay fairly straight. But I haven't really experimented with doing anything to make it straighter. Now, the China bristle brushes in particular, that's a coarser material, and those fibers will stay much straighter. But the jute does have a tendency to curl a little bit, and that's maybe one of the drawbacks of it.
Matt, Steve Sherrill here.
Yes.
I've got a question. I'm making a Z-scale micro mini layout. Now, it's awfully small. When you talk about using jute and things like this, there's got to be a minimum height that you can cut this stuff down to. What other product would you suggest I use on this project that I've got?
Well, if you can snip that jute as fine as you want, and even laying down flat, it still will create the color tones that are realistic. So I think that whether it's standing straight up or whether it's actually flat, you can still achieve the effect. So I would just do some experimentation with it, and kind of try some different samples and see how you like working with it. But most of that stuff that I had, like in those pastures, was just tiny little snips, and I just laid it basically flat on top of the ground foam. But when you want to make the tufts, I'll use tweezers and cut it down to 1/8 of an inch or 3/16 probably, which in its Z scale is going to be probably equivalent to 3 or 4 feet tall.
Yeah, you'll be taller than the first floor of a building. That's the only problem if you've got it near that. It's just the perspective. I'm working with it. I've got it. It's just you can only use certain products, I think, to attain that height.
Yeah, it's just a matter of trial and error. I mean, I don't have it down perfectly by any means. I'm still experimenting with some of these techniques. I've done 3 or 4 little dioramas, just kind of practicing. I'll probably, for the majority of my stuff, go back to some of the other commercial products, but it's good to mix it up, I think.
Yeah, you do fantastic.
Thank you so much, Matt. We really do appreciate it and look forward to seeing you back next year.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, now I want to turn to Steve Sherrill for our segment on What Do You Want to Talk About? So, Mr. Sherrill, welcome.
Let's talk about that jute, and Z scale.
All right.
Now, what I want to talk about is planning a train meet. But before I do that, I want to say hi to Bill Opperman. And Bill, if you can get on here, it's been 30 years since I've talked to Bill Opperman. And I see he's on here. So, hi, Bill. You're on mute.
You're muted.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen you, Bill. Hi.
Let's see, unmute. How's that?
You got you.
Great.
Well,
You're great.
A lot of water over the dam and under the bridge since I used to come up to your house and named you as being the first rail baron.
West Virginia.
Interim. I'm now in Katy, Texas. Trying to move up to Hyco, Texas. Finally my son got the house done up there that got me to come to Texas. So I wound up in a senior citizen apartment complex. And my dream layout in the 20-foot container and all of that is still out there on the horizon. So anyway, I've enjoyed what I've seen tonight. Had the management of this senior citizen complex fed us dinner tonight, so I was a little late getting on. But
a lot of
what I'm seeing.
A lot of complexes have train clubs in the complex. Are you in one of those?
Not in this complex. There's no train club.
Okay.
No, we have a morning coffee clutch. Almost everybody is an Air Force veteran. Of course, I'm a Marine and Army, and that's like I say, I'm surrounded by the chair force. But no, it's it's a nice place, but it wasn't how I wound up or how I planned on winding up spending my days. But there is. I was over at Paul Sazak's for an open house the other day. I don't know if you might have seen some of his stuff. Narrow gauge layout, 2 upstairs bedrooms. He's computerized it and automated it, and it's kind of here you got this narrow gauge logging and mining railroad that's fully automated, and just kind of the incongruity of it. But he does great workmanship. Used to be good hobby shops down here. Now Papa Ben's is I probably got more trains out in my storeroom than they've got.
I think Bill, if you look and see, there's a few people who are on new tracks from the old Kimberton days. So, maybe you can make a connection with some of those guys, and it's good to see.
I've Pete Lynch, his ON30 Maine Railroad. I visited him, 3 years ago, and now I live. It's 10 miles and a half hour to his place. That he's selling the house and moving into a senior citizen complex. So he's changing that up. But there's guys down here that I know, and then there's a bunch of guys that I knew that are all dead now. So it's it's few and far between some days. But
yeah, we've lost quite a few. Okay,
yeah.
now let me.
Okay, sorry to ramble on. But.
Yeah, that's okay. Hey, after when we finish here, we have a little after the show. Okay, we get talk. So hang around after that.
Okay.
What I want to talk tonight is how you plan a train meet. Okay, now I'm in the process of holding one, and it's going to be in January the 18th. And some of the problems that I ran into were obviously there are certain things you have to do when you plan one of these meets. This isn't the first one that I planned. I had about 10 or 11 from 2006 until 2011 or 12. But what you need to do, you need to have a date that you want to do it. You need to have a location and a time. You need to have a theme if it's possible, like this is a micro meet and a small layout meet. So we have certain restrictions as far as the size of these mini layouts, and no restriction on the micro layouts, except they should have movement. We don't want just dioramas. And we need a couple of contact people that participants can contact to get information. So we've got this going on, and it's going to be, like I said, January the 18th, which is a Saturday, and 2025, and everything is free. All you have to do is kind of register that you're going to have a diorama or a mini micro, and that's so we can see how much space we have. It looks like we're going to have a really nice turnout, and I'll be taking pictures and sharing them. Right now, I've got 4 or 5 of these micros that I'm doing. If anybody has any kind of a question on a micro layout build, I can probably help you a little bit on that, as I have some experience. I'm right now building I've got 2 ON30s, 1 ON18, a Z-scale, and a Thomas the Tank engine, which is kind of interesting. All different. So I just, does anybody have any questions on anything like that? And I have a question for Ed O'Rourke. Ed, if you're still on here, I got a question for you. You may cover this at a later date, but Ed, are you still here?
Yep.
Okay. I have one question. I know when I rebuilt or moved and built another layout, I had to make a decision of when to change from DC block control to DCC. Are you going to be covering something like that in your upcoming segments? If not, how did you come to that decision? Because, I had early on, I went to DCC right away.
I got into it fairly early. And I'll tell you what, trying to model the New Haven with the electrics and diesels and things, when you couldn't bring 2 things together, or run, 2 powered PAs back to back or something, that was very difficult. So having DCC made that easy. At one point, I was considering powering the catenary so I could run the electrics on that, and the diesels and the steam on the two rail. Thank God I didn't have to do that, because that would be an electrical nightmare, I think.
Did you have any to programming?
Yeah, I do some. I do it through JMRI, what I have to do. But what was then the hobby shop here got in. They were early proponents of Digitrax. So I got into Digitrax along with there's three or four other guys who were doing the same. So we all kind of got into it at the same time. And it just kind of went from there. With nowadays, we've got the other guys, which I've forgotten now, from out in Rochester. NCE is over in Rochester, and a lot of the guys have adopted that. And I think if I was doing it again, that's the way I would go, because NCE seems to be a little more user friendly, I think. But I've got too much invested in Digitrax now to change. So yeah. I've been probably doing it for at least since the early 90s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I would Digitrax, and it was very hard for me to program and things like that. So later I went to Lintz, which was much easier. And then I went to battery power, and that's by far the easiest of any of it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But that was just one of the things you run into, and I know you're going to talk about things like this when you decide to go from one layout to a brand new layout.
Well, I retrofitted the original layout for Digitrax. I just wired it into one cab of the cab control, and I was originally going to use one as DC and one as DCC, but once you get started with DCC, I just kind of went with it. In the old days, you had to wire them all in by hand. Now you buy it, it's already got the DCC all installed and everything, so there's nothing to it. All you got to do is program the address into it, and it's great. Yeah. Wiring up some of the older brass was interesting, because if you want New Haven electrics, you almost have to have brass. Wiring some of those up for DCC was exciting, I will say.
Well, it was a godsend when we started getting stuff that was DCC ready.
Yeah.
That was great. But before that, block control was always, you were saying, who's got my block? Who's got my block? And you remember those days, right?
We got one fellow whose layout we operate on. He's 85. His layout's been there 40 years. It's DC. It's old school. Each panel's got a rheostat on it. He's got the probe to throw the switches. All the switches are power routing, and it's a lot of fun to run, but it's definitely old school,
Well, this is one of the
He's
things.
an electrical engineer, so he knew what he was doing with it.
Yeah, this is one of the problems that I'm going to be running into with converting part of my railroad to ON18 is, stuff's very small.
Yeah.
I think I can battery power. I'm working on it. I think I can do it. If I can do it, it'd be no problem. Otherwise, I'm going to have to DCC something or stay DC. But again, you won't need many engines, so maybe you can get away with it, Anybody else have any input on DCC as far as when they changed over? I know that there was a lot of the old guys said, that's not for us. We're going to stay DC and block control. They fought it for a while.
Yeah. Well, that's what Marty, my friend, said. He's got too many locos to try and wire them up to convert it to DC, and it'd be a job to convert the layout. I don't know if they could do it. But it runs great. It's a lot of fun. Tell you the truth. Yeah.
I never had any trouble with it operating. I had good operation the entire time. That was not the problem. It was just I got tired of cleaning track and not being able to program properly.
Oh yeah.
Boy, that was a nightmare. For me.
Steve, you talk about that stuff in the quote early days of DCC. I built my layout in 93 and 94 when Digitrax was just starting to come on board, but I was already familiar with it from our club layout. We had the old Dynatrol analog control system where you had a plug for each locomotive, and you plugged it in the throttle, and it communicated with that locomotive. It wasn't digital and it wasn't perfect, but it worked. So I was already familiar with the concept, and the DCC portion of it, the digital portion of it, just made it seem easier at the time when I was putting it in.
Hmm.
But we're still having to hardwire the decoders into the locomotives and stuff like that.
Well, you had CTC 16 or something, didn't you, over there for a while?
We had something before Dynatrol, but I don't remember what it's called. Might have been that. It didn't work as good as the Dynatrol did.
Yeah, well, I think that DCC is nice, but I'm too old to get underneath the layout to wire that stuff up.
That too, yeah. You can get under there okay. It's getting back out that's the problem usually.
Like you said about under the
that's
step.
the trouble. Yeah. I don't have any trouble getting down on the floor. It's getting back up off the floor. That's
Yeah, you can do that when you're 50, but boy, when you get to be 80, you say, why
Steve and Ed, is there a cutoff of the amount of locomotives, give or take, that you would say you're going to run consistently, where you would maybe say you would prefer to go to DC, and how many do you think, or what type of operations do you think would make that cutoff to where it's better to go DCC, as me being a newcomer and, kind of starting to plan out my layout now, and I'm basically just going to run subway system cars. Is there a cutoff to where you think, or is there a situation where you think DC is favorable over DCC for somebody that's starting to build a layout with very few running trains? Is there a better or worse, or?
Doc, I would say that what you need to do is to see how many trains you're going to run at one time. Okay.
I would say before would be probably the max.
I would say that you should go to DCC, especially if they're already wired, ready for DCC. And it's really hard to buy something new that's not DCC ready or DCC equipped.
Yeah, and the wiring is much easier for DCC. You don't have to, get stuff into blocks and insulate this, isolate that, and have switches to turn this one on and off and everything. I think if you've got more than one loco you're trying to run at the same time, you're better off with DCC than you are trying to do it with DC, I think. If you're starting,
so essentially,
going into it,
essentially, there's not really, there's not really any significant advantage of running DC unless you're, not to sound odd about this, but just basically running a train around a Christmas tree. If you're just running a train around a loop, really no advantage of running DC.
Yeah, if you're running one train, even if you've got a branch line and you want to train out and a train back or something, with one loco, maybe that would be cheaper, certainly.
Think about it. It's very analogous to the actual railroad, right? When the railroads built their first railroad, when you built your first narrow gauge railroad to connect to the main line, you bought one engine. You didn't need to do anything to control what was happening on the railroad. That's DC. The minute you add the second locomotive, you've got to have a way that the engines don't occupy the same space. And DC is the same thing. You start breaking things up into blocks. And the more blocks you have and the more locomotives you have, the more complex it gets. The beauty of DCC is it actually takes away most of that complexity. Yeah. So, the only people really who I find are not going to DCC are people who have a large number of old DC locomotives or who've built a layout many years ago that's wired for DC and have DC locomotives and are comfortable with it. I think anybody building a layout in the last 10 to 15 years has probably gone to DC. Like I said, once they go past the single train running around a loop.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Well, listen,
there's another feature.
This has been interesting, but this can go on for quite a while, guys. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and finish the show and stop the recording and then we can continue this discussion in the after show part of it for as long as anybody wants to continue it. So if that's all right with everybody, then let me, Steve, let me stop this discussion right now and try to get the caboose done to close out the recorded part of our show.
Okay.
So with that said, I want to turn back to Phil and Tom Farrell and Jeff Jordan because they have videos that they made for the narrow gauge convention in Pittsburgh this year. And we've been using the videos that Phil has of that convention for our cabooses. And this will be then the end of this show once Phil runs this video of this part of the Pennsylvania National Narrow Gauge Convention. Phil?
Thanks, Jim. I'm actually going to run a video tonight that is Mr. Boudet's layout, and you're going to see this. This is the first of, I think we're going to have at least 7. I think there may be 8 of these. This one was particularly interesting. It was an OM30 layout. So it's going to start with a video of the layout, and then we've got a number of still pictures that were taken. Basically, I did the video stuff. Tom and Jeff took the still pictures. So you'll be able to see the layout, kind of how it fits into the room, and then see a number of scene views of the layout. So here we go.
It's really beat up. But and there's a way car in that
in Buffalo Park.
Yeah.
Yep. But the one on the chicken farm is the only car I have ever seen that actually had the remains of the flexible end beam still on it.
Okay.
Because the Sherman's Valley, somehow they found an equipment supplier that made like couplers like what would be on the front of a locomotive pilot beam. So they just put automatic couplers in the link and pin pockets, and they didn't have to cut off the flexible beam or jack up the bolsters. So that's how they did it. But that car in Blaine is the only one I've ever seen that still has.
In like Perry,
Yes.
County. Yeah, exactly. In Carlisle.
Oh, I never Blaine.
Yeah. I went to college at Dickinson, and I used to go up over Sturrott's Gap and Wagner's Gap. That was a trip. It was like, there's one traffic light, and it's just a flashing red in New Bloomfield. That's it for the entire county. So it was like whatever the hell, it was like November, October, whatever. And one day, this is 6th grade science, general science. And one day I'm like, I go in and there's like 3 kids in the class. And I'm like, where is everybody? Like, it's dough day. First day. Like, it's dough day. I'm like, what's dough day? And then the next day, these little girls, 12 years, I got my first dough. I'm like, oh my God. Like, wow, you're tough as nails. Like,
honestly, around here, most of the schools just make it a holiday.
The first day of
Buck Fever. Buck Fever, and then there's a second Buck Fever the first day of pirate season.
Yeah, that was hilarious. I'm like, oh my God. And then I went to a family party. And they had this crock pot. There's like meatballs and
See the loads through the top.
I don't know about that. Some sort of processing. Yeah, I like them deer balls.
Up around Delville,
I have no idea what that is. Yeah.
there is the caboose from the Perry County Railroad that was put on narrow gauge trucks. The owner used to take a hunting party out. There's pictures of them going bear hunting. Gringe was his name. But anyway, it was a standard gauge caboose, but they would put it on narrow gauge trucks, and they'd take it to the end of the line, and that was their hunting camp. That car is sitting in somebody's backyard.
We're debating what is that industry?
That was the Ross Farm phosphate plant. They ground up limestone.
Okay,
that was the original.
Those are coke ovens as
Yeah,
well.
those were the original ovens, but the coke had too much moisture in it, so they went to the beehive ovens.
Okay.
But originally in the 1870s, the Belgian ovens were a new idea.
Okay.
And if you look at like a modern steel mill,
Yes,
that's the great granddaddy of
right.
how they
That's
do
what
it.
it looks like. Yeah.
That you have the pusher cart,
Right.
you know, now they like lift the doors off, but you still have those long compartments, and you know, now everything's, you know, they dust control, but that's basically the same principle, you know, like
Is that what are these?
they're cut so the mule can walk.
Right.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
but it's wood?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, because I have some books on the British ones with stones.
I've seen that.
Yeah, yeah. I have a reading a book called Stone Sleepers and Iron Rails, which lists all of the horse-drawn tramways in Britain, and there are hundreds of them, there are thousands of miles of stone sleeper horse-drawn track in Britain. You know, this is like 1790.
I was going to say, you go back to the 1790s. Now they weren't flange wheels. They were like U channel or L channel.
Usually 3 or 4 feet long per girder, like, and some of them had sort of girders so that it's tall in the middle.
Yeah, but some of them you could just take, you know, your wagon, put it onto that plateway or whatever they call it. Yeah, but I mean, if it was spring mud and you're hauling coal or something, but that's how they started. Once somebody figured out, let's try to hook a steam powered.
I actually modeled this.
Well, right by where the convention.
These are some of my photos. Just as an introduction, this layout is modeled on the latter part of the 19th century in central Pennsylvania. I believe it's supposed to be a fictional branch of the East Broad Top Railroad, and it is tremendously captured the look and feel of central Pennsylvania. And if I recall, everything you were seeing, all of these structures are scratch built, including the large phosphate plant. So it's really a remarkable layout, and the description of museum quality really captures it. I mean, the completeness, you know, the scenery, the blending of the scenery together, the structures blending into the scenery, the little communities looking absolutely realistic. It's just a tremendous layout. And of course, one of the beauties of modeling the late 19th century, no power lines. Notice all the little details, the stuff on the porches, the open windows.
You know, Jeff, it looks like he's really captured a moment in time.
A friend of mine used to describe layouts like this as, I think I've been there.
Yeah.
Motor vehicle, so he must have pushed it into the early 20th century.
large is this layout?
It fills his entire basement.
Well, Phil, Jeff, Tom, thank you so much for sharing the layout with us. This is really something to see, and it really is a really great piece of workmanship. So thank you so much for the videos and the pictures. Well, that's it for our show this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, hope you learned something. After all, that's what the shows are all about. Thanks for coming. Happy modeling to you. See you.